Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how it's not just the mainstream media which is struggling to come to terms with what's happening in this election, but the Conservatives themselves who are having to face a dose of reality as they begin to realise just how big a threat the Liberal Democrats are posing them. So yesterday I talked about the way the election results may shock people from Labour's point of view, but the Lib Dems could trigger a few surprises of their own. In fact, they might produce the biggest surprise of all if everything goes well this week. At least the public know about Labour. The mainstream media coverage of this election has been more unbalanced than I think I can remember. And I don't just mean the Tory client media. You expect that. Not a single media outlet has been reporting on the different political parties in anything like proportion to any objective metric, whether it be their standing in the previous parliament or their expected share of the vote in the polls. You look through, it's almost entirely Labour and the Conservatives, with the rest of the coverage being Reform UK. Entire days can go by without a single mention of the Liberal Democrats in even The Guardian. That must be the outlet most friendly towards them. Some of Ed Davies' water stunts and today's crane stunt have looked very weird, but without them, would his party be mentioned at all? If we'd had proper coverage of this election, I think the Conservatives would be in far deeper trouble. But it may well be that the media can't do enough to shelter the Tories this time. I'm starting to see reports that the Tories are waking up to the fact there's a lot of tactical voting going on. A lot. Now, this shouldn't really come as any surprise to them. The conditions are all there. There was a lot of tactical voting in 1997 as a significant chunk of the electorate determined that they didn't want a repeat of 1992 this time and were alive to the realities of first past the post. If you wanted to prioritise the removal of your Conservative candidate, then you voted for the main challenger to them. Well, decades later, and the current Conservative government is even more despised, and so the motivating factor driving tactical voting is back and even bigger. But more than that, it's organised in a way it never was in 1997. The movement has grown out of initiatives such as Swap My Vote into slick operations like Stop the Tories Do Vote, which have driven tactical voting in both of the past 2 years of local elections with very high accuracy. The mainstream media haven't been talking about that either. When they have mentioned tactical voting at all, which is rare, the people behind it not mentioned. With the exception of when Carol Vorderman is in front of a camera, of course, doing all the heavy lifting for the entire media. We've also been seeing clear signs of tactical voting in Westminster by-elections over the past few years as well, between Labour and Lib Dem voters anyway. So when it comes to tactical voting, the demand is higher, but so too is the supply of information to help you. And as the general election campaign has rumbled on, this has been reflected in the polls. The so-called poll gap between Labour and the Conservatives has not moved. But that does not mean that there has been no movement in the voting intention polls. There has. Analysts such as Dylan Difford and Beyond Topline have been yet again this weekend discussing this on Twitter. Difford noting that the fundamentals for Labour have just been getting stronger and stronger over the course of this campaign. What he means by that is, it's like Keir Starmer has, by some distance now, the highest rating for most capable Prime Minister of any leader of the opposition about to become Prime Minister in my lifetime. Labour as a party are also beating the Conservatives on every metric as well. That is unique, by the way. That's never been the case before, since polling was properly established in the late 70s anyway. It's never been the case that one party is led on everything. When Labour were beasted in 1983 and then 2019, they still led on some things. People still thought they would be better for some things. When the Tories were smashed in 1997, they still led on some things, including the economy. But this time, no, Labour lead on everything. Yet the polls are not giving Labour an increasing share of the vote. If anything, it's a bit lower. What gives? Tactical voting and vote efficiency. Share of the vote counts for nothing in a first past the post system. Vote efficiency is Labour being relentlessly focusing their efforts on constituencies where they need to gain votes to win that seat and not wasting resources at all propping up already large majorities or chasing after seats they've got no chance. It's actually caused a bit of distress from some Labour candidates in safe areas who've seen, hang on a minute, my majority is going to fall here. It's like, yeah, you're still going to win. Calm down. Just with maybe one or two exceptions. But the tactical voting is what is now worrying the Tories, who seem to have only just accepted what's going on. There's been a lot of movement in the polls of votes passing between Labour and the Lib Dems in particular. And where it's been happening is so stark that even the Tories have now noticed. Where Labour are challenging, there's been a lot of Lib Dem support going to Labour. Where the Lib Dems are challenging, there's been Labour support going to the Lib Dems. Even partisan voters are increasingly deciding it's in everyone's interests that there be as few Tory MPs as possible in the next Parliament. Having more Tories never made anything better, ever. And it would appear that the Tories are cottoning on to this at last. Perhaps because the media weren't mentioning the Lib Dems, they fell into the trap of forgetting they exist as well. But the thing about tactical voting is, it doesn't really rely on the campaign of the parties who benefit. It only relies on people wanting to punish the Tories and realising that tactical voting is the best way to do that. As soon as people realise that, all they need to know is where do they get the information. Stop the Tories Do Vote, by the way. The Tories had already accepted that they were going to lose to Labour. Their talk of 1992 melted away fairly quickly once the campaign got underway. But even as recently as last week, they simply tilted to, 1997, that's not good. An article in Bloomberg says, they've talked to the Conservative, Labour and Lib Dem campaigns, and they've all seen evidence that large numbers of people in vulnerable Conservative seats have been using online tactical voting tools. Let's hope they've been using the right ones, not the fake Tory ones or well-meaning duds. The article suggests that the Lib Dem share of the vote has increased by 2.3% over the course of the campaign. Now, they've taken that from one source. It's not necessarily the source I would have taken it from. But even if you average out all the polls, that is actually roughly in line with the general trend. And 2.3% could potentially be getting on for 750,000 voters. Now, sure, those people will be spread out a bit. But if it's largely as a result of tactical voting, then you would think the bulk of them are concentrated in those vulnerable Conservative seats where the Lib Dems are challenging. I mean, that could be 10,000, 15,000 extra votes in quite a few key seats. If that's what happens this Thursday, the Tories are going to get absolutely smashed from all sides. This is why I keep saying that, yes, on the balance of probability, we have to look at the polls and accept that the Tories probably finish in second place and lead the opposition. But he is so close to that flip, that realignment of British politics that could lead to something very interesting. Basically, the Tories have spent so long trying to convince themselves that voters don't really want a Labour government and agonising over how to counter the threat from Reform UK without saying anything mean about Daddy Farage, that they've forgotten the Lib Dems are their traditional opponents in key battlegrounds as well. It's not just Labour who's spent years in the wilderness and have now come back more focused. There are the Conservatives even now who are looking at 150 seats and thinking, that's rubbish, that's our worst ever result. I don't really only win 150 seats, that's pathetic. 150 seats, you'll be lucky, mate. I've got two bets on for this election. One of them is for the Tories to finish with fewer than 100 seats. It's not certain, of course, but I am confident they will not be getting, or they're not going to get anywhere near 150. And if there are Conservatives looking at how to rebuild their party after the election, and they're basing their plans on a parliamentary party of 150, I think there's going to be a lot of plans thrown in the bin this coming Friday. The meltdown coming for the Tories is going to be dramatic. And remember, if you or someone you know lives in one of the 80 key seats identified by Stop the Tories Vote, just getting a few extra people to check it out and vote accordingly, that could make the difference. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.